Illinois Policy Institute chief economist. Do you have any idea how hard it is to get the chief economist? But I read an article, and I said to Misty Callahan, I want you to get me right now Orphe Divounguy. And she said,
You hear that whooshing sound? That's my career going down the toilet.
Because we're going to talk about how bad your home equity has been flushed like Misty's career after this interview. How are you, Orphe?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. Listen, I got to tell you something. I figured this out years ago. I'm an old commodity guy. I went through the whole economics of life itself, and then I always had a real estate license. So when you semi-retire from the mercantile exchange, you can't go work for anybody because it's hard to say, I like my own schedule, I hate people, and I don't work good with bosses. So I had to open my own business, and it was a real estate company. Been very aware of how detrimental mafia politics is to home values and commercial real estate values. But we are here. This is the precipice of failure. Am I right?
I mean, that's correct. We looked at back in June, we predicted that mortgage delinquencies were going to increase.
Did you think it would be 79%?
No. I mean, we saw almost a doubling of the rate. Our models are pretty good at predicting that the mortgage delinquency rate would double this year, and it has. So we had pretty good model predictions. You got about 55,000 new mortgages that are now delinquent on top of what was there already at the start of the year. Illinois had the second highest foreclosure rate in the country before COVID happened. So COVID-19 just worsened the situation.
But Orphe, you said something, and I don't think I want them to really focus on this. You had a massive increase of new mortgages. So these are people that within the last 18 to 24 months took a mortgage out and then stopped paying it. So not only is there absolutely no equity in those mortgages, 80% of which are FHA, which means they put 3.5% down, or in some cases nothing. There's negative value. So from the moment they bought it, it was eligible for a short sale when they stopped paying their mortgage. Is that correct?
Well, look, you have a situation where for about a decade, right? For the past decade, we had an economic expansion, but during that economic expansion, we had the weakest appreciation in housing in the country, right? Illinois housing did not appreciate very much, all while homeowners are drowning in the second highest property taxes in the country, right? So you have rising costs. You don't have much appreciation, and then COVID happens, right? COVID happens. You have a lot of people losing their jobs. Like 1.5 million Illinoisans lost their jobs since March, and it all makes sense, right? You lose your job, and on top of that, you're already upside down on your mortgage. You're not going to be able to pay the bills. You're not going to be able to pay the mortgage, and so a lot of people went into delinquency. But here's what's really interesting. The federal government has tried over and over and over to get a stimulus package out to Americans, right, to Illinoisans, right? We had one stimulus package. The Federal Reserve Bank lowered interest rates, doing everything it can to stimulate the economy. But in Illinois, we seem to be doing the opposite, right? We seem to be going counter, right, against the stimulus, because we have this progressive income tax on the ballot in November, and that progressive income tax is actually going to cause a lot of pain, both in labor and housing markets, basically undoing any kind of progress and destroying any kind of potential recovery.
But the real reason, too, that I think it's not addressed is the fact of Illinois falling so far behind during that 10-year expansion was a direct result of the hidden taxation of bad public policy. So when you compare Illinois, to a state that is run well, whether you pick Tennessee or Florida or Texas, whatever, you see that their home appreciation not only kept up with inflation, but in some cases superseded that. When Illinois didn't even keep up with the cost of inflation. See, people don't understand how to inflationally adjust money. And when you do that and add your costs on top of it, you realize you've taken a bath of about 50% of your money in the last 10 to 20 years.
Yeah, and they say it's only going to hurt the rich. It's just not, that's just not true. When you look at the last state to enact a progressive income tax, that was Connecticut in 1996. What are the lessons learned from Connecticut? Well, lessons learned from Connecticut is that housing appreciation actually decreased in Connecticut relative to similar states, right? These nearby states like Massachusetts and New Jersey. You saw in the 10 years that followed the introduction of a progressive income tax in Connecticut, you saw similar housing units appreciate 20% less in Connecticut than in surrounding states. And that's kind of the stuff that we're expecting to see if a progressive income tax is adopted in Illinois.
Well, if it does happen, I mean, you've already seen Illinois is the number one per capita of people exiting the state. Ironically, people think those are just rich people leaving, when the fact of the matter is that's not the case. Those are middle to low earners who have an age gap from about 28 to 58. You're losing the earners of your state, because the reality is, Orphe, if you have aspirations to do better, you cannot do it in Illinois. So in essence, you're a young man. But if you had a son who was graduating college, would you tell him to stay in Illinois?
Oh, absolutely not, unfortunately. Unless there's change, and we're fighting. We're really fighting for change at the Illinois Policy Institute. If the governor is listening right now, I urge him. Good leaders understand when they're wrong, and turn the ship around, right? Mm. And I urge him to turn the ship around, right? The Illinoisans are facing rampant public corruption. So it's not just a tax problem, man. We got a corruption problem. We got public services that are deteriorating because of rapidly growing pension costs. And our state leaders are refusing to embrace any kind of responsible reform. And that's unfortunate, right? So if these leaders are listening right now, be strong leaders, acknowledge when you're wrong, and turn the ship around. It's not too late. We're going into November. We're in a really, really dire economic situation. Stopping with the nonsense that's on all the ads that we're seeing on TV and on social media. Spending $50 million promoting a policy that would actually decimate labor and housing markets in the state of Illinois. That's really, really unfortunate.
Orphe, the governor is eating right now, but I will make sure that his waiter passes this along to him before he heads to Lake Geneva. Because the reality is, this kind of damage really doesn't affect the people who are making money through the corruption in the political system. Everyone asks me all the time, why does Governor Pritzker spend his own money and spend his own money and spend his own money? The reality is, number one, it's not his money. It's been left to him, and that's the money that he's spending is, in fact, money he's been earning on passive investments that even he didn't control. So it's just free money to give away. And in the event he helps himself, he does manage to carve the cutouts for all of the commercial property that his family has interest in. Would you not agree with that? The wealthy, right? The rest of us don't. Yeah. And so, and we know that we've heard of the different scandals, right? The money hidden in overseas and assets hidden everywhere. The wealthy have options. The rest of us don't. And so, it's time that elected officials actually decide to serve the people who voted for them and elected them in the first place. Working age Illinoisans are struggling, and they need help right now. Orphe, stick with me through the break, and we're going to go through the Panama Papers a little more in-depthly. All right, fair enough?
Sure.
I'm kidding. We'll be back after this. We are back. Chief economist, Illinois Policy Institute, Orphe Divounguy. I'm probably butchering your name, and I apologize. But this is interesting to me, and I'm going to tell you why. I don't think people understand. The reason these multimillionaires and these conglomerate real estate REIT holders don't mind what they're doing is because, number one, they don't pay income tax on income because their money comes from passive investments. So it's completely different than the way working men and women pay taxes. In fact, he can manipulate his taxes to anything he really wants it to be. When you have commercial real estate, correct me if I'm wrong, Orphe, and the price is getting crushed, but you do not intend to sell that property, that's just more of a reason for you to argue against the taxation of the value. And you get the tax advantages of depreciation. Is that correct?
So, for the average individual, it's, you invest, you have capital assets, you have, capital gains, you're hoping the stock market's going to do well. But, the average American puts most of their money into their house, right? Their house is their most valuable asset. And so, they want that asset to appreciate over time so that maybe they can take some home equity and send their kids to college. And maybe they can, they have a great idea and they can start a business using that home equity loan. So when your costs are right and you cannot get enough home equity out of that asset, right, out of that home, then you're stuck, right? It takes away from your, the opportunity, this American dream, right? I own a home, I grow my wealth, right, through this home equity. It takes that away completely, and so that's why we should care that raising taxes have a negative effect on housing wealth.
I couldn't agree more with you, but my broader point is we're talking about a man that's spending $50 million of his own money to pass a tax because he wants increased revenue that he understands him and his friends are never going to pay it because they don't earn their money the way we do. They're not paying those taxes.
That's right. I mean, that's right. They could delay those. They could delay those capital realizations, right? So they don't need that income as much as we do. And so they don't have to pay that extra tax that we pay on ordinary income.
And the other side of the coin is let's just say for argument's sake, let's make up a scenario. I own the Hyatt Real Estate Investment Trust, and I have properties that are valued at $500 million spread throughout Illinois. I want that value to go down. That's less taxes I have to pay. That's more depreciation I can write off. That's a better loss for my other income. So what would I care if everybody's houses went down? Just so my commercial real estate went down as well, it's less for me to pay, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to go as far as what, his intentions are.
Oh, come over there with me. You'll feel good about yourself. It's like running through the forest naked. Just do it.
No. I don't want to speculate, right, as to what the governor's intentions are. But I'll tell you what, it's whatever is going on in Illinois right now is hurting Illinoisans, and elected officials need to realize that and change course immediately. And if they don't, voters need to come together and finally vote them out. It's about time, right? So this is what we have elections coming up in November.
I think Pritzker's jamming your phone, Orphe. I think he's jamming it. I think he heard you waffle, and he said, I'm going to jam this guy's phone. But listen, I have to go to commercial break. I want to thank you so much for joining me. Will you do it again? Because I've had fun.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, and next time what I'm going to do is I'm going to pretend to be a lawyer that is a politician, and I set up a scheme where only I can lower property taxes. We're going to have fun with that one too, Orphe. Thank you so much for joining me. We'll be back after this. Thank you.